Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So we have to do a little bit of preparatory work. If I were to ask you, name a famous city in the Bible, what would be at the top of the list?
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem. Absolutely excellent. Name another city that is in the Bible.
Jericho.
Bethel, Jericho. Excellent. Now, name a city in the Bible that has been turned into a verb in English.
Jerusalem?
Jerusalem is not a verb. There is no way to Jerusalem. That actually sounds wrong. You cannot make a verb. You can't say, I want to Jerusalem next week. You can say, I want to be in Jerusalem, and that is always a good feeling to have, but it doesn't really work as a verb. I'll give you a hint. We are formally introduced to the city and its king, along with its slightly less famous neighbor, in this week's Torah portion, but they take center stage in next week's Torah portion, when Abraham has to beg God to reconsider. Sodom and Gomorrah. People usually say it as one long sentence, Sodom and Gomorrah, right? But this is, in fact, in many ways, the second most famous city in the Bible, because it is the only city that has been translated into a verb in English language and done so wrong. It's really quite frustrating because, you know, a lot of things in English actually came from the translation, the King James translation, and entered the English language, because oftentimes that would be the only book a family might own. And then that has allowed many Hebrew idioms to enter into the English language. But the word Sodom, or to sodomize, got into the English language, and they didn't bother checking with us of whether or not how they were applying it was correct. And so English is now burdened with this albatross of a word that many people point back as being somehow biblical in its origin. But as the ones who actually dealt with the Bible first, I can tell you that our sages do not equate the modern term and the modern act represented by the word Sodom to the actual people of Sodom. Yes, very famous, the scene outside Lot's door when the townsfolk are hammering away, demanding that he hand over the visitors so that they can know them in a way that is clearly not to the visitors' advantage. Yes, that is a very famous scene, but it is a mere symptom of the crimes of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah for which they were destroyed. Now, how do we know that this is a mere symptom rather than the actual centerpiece? Well, because when you look through the rest of Tanakh, you will find that there is only one other place where the crimes of Sodom are enumerated. Yes, we talk about the destruction of Sodom in many other passages throughout the rest of Tanakh, but the actual sin of Sodom is only mentioned in the Bible in one other place, in the book of Ezekiel. I'm not going to force you all to know that. Book of Ezekiel, chapter 16, those of you that want to look this up later, and I will paraphrase it for your convenience. Ezekiel talks about the crime of Sodom, and talks about them being like our sister, because he is attacking us for our own crimes. And he says, what was the crime of Sodom? Though people in that city had everything. You must remember that the Jordan Valley plain where Sodom and Gomorrah were situated, much like the modern day city of Jericho, was an extremely fertile and wonderful place to live. That's why Lot chose to go live there in the first place. And it was the kind of place that was extremely overflowing in wealth. Yet, says Ezekiel, despite having plenty, despite living in tranquility and comfort, when it came time to help the poor, they did not. That the people of Sodom did not help the poor. That was their crime. That was what they were blasted for, says Ezekiel. And the rabbis in the Midrash and in the Talmud and commentaries pick up that mantle. The incident at the door, yes, they talk about that being a problem, but not because of the supposed sexual problem within it, although, of course, rape is always a huge iniquity, but because of what it represented of how they were treating vulnerable strangers. Strangers in the ancient world was synonymous with poor, because after all, if you showed up in a place and you had nothing, you were even more vulnerable than the local poor, because you had no family connections to help you at all. And indeed, that is how the strangers first appear in the town square of Sodom. It is why Lot, having been raised with the hospitality of Abraham, rushes out to bring them into his house, because he knows the people of that city do not treat poor and poor strangers at all with kindness. And of course, this is borne out by the later text. The rabbis of the Midrash go on to interpret their behavior, the way they came and assaulted the door, the way that Lot tried to pull them in, knowing that there might be a problem, the language that the Torah surrounds this whole escapade in. And they say the people of Sodom were so terrible that if somebody were to even help somebody that was in poor, this could get them executed by the courts of the city. That in fact they would flip the rulings of the court in order to punish those that help and to reward those that hurt. That if somebody were to assault you, they argue, that you would actually be charged in court with having stolen medical treatment from them because they caused you to bleed, and going to the bloodletter was a perfectly normal medical practice back then. So therefore the victim should have to pay the assaulter for the privilege of having been made to bleed by him. We see how this flips the world on its head. The people of Sodom understood the world upside down, and so, says our tradition, God took their world and flipped it upside down. A little bit of poetic justice, if you will. What does this mean? Well, Judaism is very much interested in ensuring not only that we recognize the problems of the past and the problems of other cities and the crimes of their people, but that we should learn from this. Too much of the last 2,000 years in other faith traditions has focused on the narrow interpretation of the scene at the door, imagining that the only problem in Sodom was the sexual appetites of the people in that city. When in fact, the underlying flaw, as seen in the Bible and as understood by our sages, was the selfishness of the people in that community. Indeed, Pirkei Avot, the great compilation of the teachings of our sages from 2,000 years ago, when they are trying to talk about the different ways people have an attitude in the world, they divide the world into 4 types of people. They often do this. It's a good logical rubric for remembering things. They say there are people who say, what is mine, and what is yours is mine. These are terrible people. And then there are people who say, what is mine is yours, and what is yours is yours. These are saintly people. And then there are people who say, what is mine is yours, and what is yours is mine, and these are crazy, stupid people. And then there are people who say, what is mine, and what is yours is yours. And the first rabbis say, and this is the in-between kind of people. They're not terrible, and they're not great. And then a voice joins in Pirkei Avot and says, no, that in fact is the attitude of the Sodomite. The one who says, what is mine, and what is yours, and if what you have is only enough to let you slowly starve to death in the street of our town, so be it. Because why should I give from mine to help you? Mine is mine, and yours is yours. If yours is not enough to feed your children, that is not my problem. That's your problem. I'm not causing you to suffer. I am not stealing from you, but neither am I obligated to help you. And the rabbis understood that this underlying, seemingly fair position, if allowed to fester, if not counterbalanced by the moral imperative of helping those in need, but simply set up as a false legal framework to allow them to starve, can cause a society to indeed be destroyed from within. That if we cannot look with compassion, if we cannot look with mercy upon others that are in dire circumstances, if we cannot feel compelled that through justice, tzedakah, that if we cannot feel a need to help them, that we indeed are sodomites, that we indeed are sodomizing our fellows. It's a shame that that word has become so unfortunately linked to a very different physical act, rather than to the moral failings of that city. We should hopefully reclaim it, and we should hopefully, of course, avoid it. Shabbat Shalom.